The jungle was too quiet that night. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Moonlight slipped through the thick alien leaves, casting silver patterns on the ground. The air was warm, but the silence made it feel cold. Raja moved carefully, her long ears twitching at every sound. She was a scout of her tribe, one of the youngest. She had sharp eyes and quick feet. But that night, something felt wrong. She stepped over a root, and then a sudden hiss, a sharp sting on her ankle. She gasped and fell. Her leg burning, the snake was gone before she could see it clearly. Its fangs had already done their job. Rage's breath came fast. Her vision blurred. She tried to stand, but her leg wouldn't move from the trees nearby. Her tribe had been watching. They had seen the snake strike, and they knew what it meant. They whispered to each other, their eyes wide with fear. "It's the death bite," someone said. "No one survives it," said another. "She's doomed." They turned their backs. No one moved to help her, not even her sister, who stood with tears in her eyes. To them, she was already gone. But someone else was near, a human, stranded from a crash days ago. He had built a small shelter not far from the tribe's hidden camp. He was alone, injured, and barely surviving. That night, he had trouble sleeping. Strange sounds echoed through the jungle. Then he heard a cry, a soft, painful sound. He grabbed the sharp piece of metal he used as a knife and stepped outside. He moved toward the sound, heart pounding, and then he saw her, a figure lying under the trees, glowing faintly under the moonlight. She was shaking, her legs swelling fast. The human knelt beside her. She was still conscious. Her eyes full of fear. "Poison," she whispered in her alien tongue. But he understood enough. Her breathing was short, and her skin had gone pale. He saw the bite on her ankle, 2 deep marks, already dark. There was no time to think, no time to wait. He took out his knife. She cried out when he cut near the wound. Then, without a word, he lowered his head and did what no one else dared to do. He sucked out the venom, spat it out again and again. He did this for minutes, fighting his own fear. He didn't know if it would work, but he couldn't just let her die. The taste was bitter. His mouth went numb, but he didn't stop, even when his own hands began to shake. Even when sweat ran down his face like rain, from the shadows, unseen eyes watched. Her tribe had followed quietly. They stared in shock. No one has ever done that, a voice whispered. The girl passed out in his arms. He lifted her gently and carried her back to his shelter. The others didn't follow. They only watched in silence. Inside his rough shelter made of broken metal and leaves, he laid her down. He covered her with his only blanket. She was burning with fever already. He didn't sleep that night. He crushed herbs he had found earlier and wrapped them around her. "Ankle," he whispered calm words, though she could not hear him. He placed a cool cloth on her head and sat beside her, watching every breath. Morning came slowly. The sun rose over the jungle, but she did not wake. He felt the fear grow in his chest. Had he been too late? Then her fingers moved. A soft sound came from her lips. Her eyes fluttered open, weak but alive. She saw him sitting beside her. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. Outside, the jungle sang its morning song. Birds called, creatures moved. But inside that little shelter, something had changed. A human had done what no one else would. He had risked himself for a stranger, for someone not even his kind. And now, the story of that night, the bite, the blood. The bravery was only just beginning. Raja woke to the sound of dripping water and the strange hum of insects. Her body was sore, her mouth dry, and her leg throbbed with a dull pain. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then she saw the strange metal walls around her, rough and dented, patched with leaves and cloth. A human sat nearby, silent, watching her with tired eyes. He looked weak, like he hadn't slept all night. She remembered the bite, the poison, the heat. And his hands. He had saved her. He offered her a small container made of scrap. Filled with water, she took it, her hands trembling. It was the first time a human had touched her without fear or disgust. She drank slowly, trying not to spill it. He didn't speak much, just nodded and pointed to the herbs on her leg. She stared at him, confused. Why would he help her? Her own people had left her behind like broken meat, but this outsider had carried her, sat beside her all night, and shared his last water. She looked at his hands. Blistered and rough, he must have done all this while hurting too. She wanted to thank him. But the words didn't come easily. Instead, she touched her chest with one hand and tilted her head. A simple gesture from her tribe that meant life. The human tilted his head, then smiled just a little. That smile confused her more than anything else. Outside, something cracked through the trees. The human stood quickly, grabbing his broken metal blade. He moved to the doorway, his body tense. Raja tried to sit up, but winced, her leg still weak. She heard voices, familiar ones. Her tribe. She froze, her heart racing. Why had they come back? She thought they'd never return. The human stepped out to face them. Raja could hear the tribal tongue, sharp and cold. They were angry, not grateful. One voice shouted her name, demanding she come out. She pulled herself up, leaning on the wall. Her breath was shaky, but she made it to the doorway. Her sister stood in front, her face hard like stone. You were touched, she said. By him. Raja opened her mouth to explain. But they didn't want truth. They only wanted tradition. She was saved, the human said suddenly, his voice rough but clear. She would have died. The tribe didn't care. To them, saving her that way was worse than letting her die. They believed his mouth had cursed her blood. Raja looked at their eyes, cold, judging. The same people she grew up with now saw her as dirt. She's not one of us anymore, someone said. Return to the soil, Raja, said another. Or stay with your beast. Raja looked at the human. He didn't say anything. But his expression said he was ready to protect her again, even if it meant pain. She looked back at her tribe, her people, her blood. Then she stepped beside the human and said nothing. Her silence said enough. The tribe turned and walked away. Her sister hesitated for a moment, eyes full of something between hate and regret. Then she too vanished into the jungle. Raja's legs gave out, but the human caught her before she hit the ground. He helped her sit, brought her more water, and said nothing. Neither of them spoke for a long time. There was only wind, the sound of insects, and the pain of being unwanted. She stared at the fire he had built, small but warm. She wondered what kind of male he was. Not strong like her warriors, not beautiful like the singers. But he had something else, something rare. That night, as stars filled the sky, Raja lay beside the fire. The human placed another cloth on her ankle and handed her a piece of dried food. She took it, not because she was hungry, but because it meant something. She chewed slowly, then whispered her first words to him in his language. Why? She asked. Why you saved me? He looked at her for a long time, then said softly, because no one else did. She didn't sleep right away. She stared at the stars, wondering. If the spirits were angry or proud, she had lost her people. But she had gained something else, something she couldn't name yet, but could feel. The jungle was no longer silent. It spoke in new ways now. And in that strange place with metal walls and a human who didn't walk away, Raja took her first deep breath since the bite. Whatever was coming next, she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't face it alone. Raja opened her eyes to a strange smell, sharp and bitter. Smoke curled above her. And the human sat close by, grinding leaves in a stone bowl. He looked focused, his brow furrowed, hands steady, outside. The sky was dark with heavy clouds, and thunder rolled far away. Her ankles still ached. But the fire inside her body, the fever, was worse. She felt heat in her chest, her skin damp with sweat. She tried to sit up, but the world tilted sideways. The human noticed and rushed to her side, gently laying her back down. He pressed a wet cloth to her forehead, his eyes full of worry. She didn't understand his words, but his hands told her everything. He was trying to save her again, not with weapons or strength, but with care. Rain began falling on the roof, soft at first, then louder. Water dripped through a broken piece of metal, but the human ignored it. He lifted her head and gave her something warm to drink, bitter, sour, but it eased her throat. She swallowed it, barely keeping it down. Time passed strangely in the fever. Voices came and went, shadows moved, and her body shook without reason. She dreamed of her mother's voice, of dancing near fires, of running through trees. Then the dreams shifted. She saw the human fighting monsters, holding her in his arms, yelling her name. Sometimes she woke, crying out, and he was always there, never far. One night, the fever peaked. Her body went still, lips pale, breath shallow. The human sat holding her hand, his eyes red. He whispered words she didn't understand, but his voice cracked with pain. He thought she was dying. He lifted her, wrapped her in cloth, and held her close, trying to share his body heat. Outside, lightning lit the trees and thunder crashed like the roar of gods. Inside, there was only the sound of her slow breath and the man refusing to let her go. Then, a twitch of her fingers. Her lips parted and a faint sound escaped. The human froze, then leaned closer. Her eyes fluttered open, and though her voice was weak, her words were clear. "You still here?" she whispered. He laughed once, softly, not because it was funny, but because it was relief. He placed his hand on her forehead. Was still warm, but not burning. The worst had passed. The next morning, the storm had cleared. Sunlight touched the jungle leaves, steam rising from the wet ground. The shelter smelled of herbs, smoke, and something new hope. Rija sat up slowly, leaning against the wall. The human handed her food, a strange root, boiled and soft. She ate slowly, watching him, studying him. He wasn't like the males of her kind. He had no fur, no claws, no tribal markings. But he had something else, something deeper. She pointed to herself, then to the leg, then to him. "You saved," she said in broken words. He nodded and pointed to his chest. "I tried," he said simply. There was silence for a moment. Then she asked, "Why not leave?" The human looked confused, so she asked again, this time tapping her heart. "Why you stay?" He sat down beside her, his voice quiet. "I was alone too," he said. "And you didn't scream when you saw me. You just needed help. That was enough." She looked down at the ground, her fingers curling around the food. No one in her tribe had ever spoken to her like that, even before the bite. She was different. Her skin was lighter, her ears smaller. Some said she was touched by spirits, not in a good way. Now, she was truly cast out, marked as unclean. But this human had shared water, food, warmth, and nearly his own life, all without asking anything back. That night, Raja didn't lie on the far side of the shelter like before. She sat close to the fire, close to him. They didn't speak much, but the silence was soft, not heavy. She watched the firelight dance on his face and wondered. Maybe he wasn't sent by mistake. Maybe he was the answer the stars had whispered about since her childhood. Not a warrior, not a prince, but someone who simply refused to let her die. As she drifted to sleep that night, her head resting near his arm, she whispered one word, clear and quiet: "Stay." And though he didn't say anything, his hand gently rested over hers. He wasn't going anywhere. Not now, not after everything the fever had broken, but something stronger had started in its place. And the jungle, wild and full of danger, would soon test them both again. The fire had burned low. Ash covered the bottom of the pot, and morning mist curled under the shelter's edges. Raja stirred from sleep. Her body stronger now, her fever gone. The human was outside, crouching near the stream, cleaning a jagged blade of metal. She watched him from the doorway. His back was bare, covered in small cuts and bruises. He had taken damage from something, but never spoke of it. She didn't know his name, only his kindness. Raja stepped outside slowly, leaning on the wooden stick he had carved for her. The jungle was waking up. Strange birds cried overhead, and the leaves sparkled from the morning rain. She took a deep breath, the air fresh but heavy with something else. A feeling, a warning in her bones. The human looked up and gave a small smile, then pointed toward the trees. They had found new fruit there, red and bitter but safe to eat. They walked slowly together. Raja still limping, but this time she wasn't weak. She was watching, listening. Suddenly, the birds went silent. No wind moved the trees. The human froze, eyes sharp. He raised his arm to block Raja's path. A low growl came from behind the vines. Raja's heart dropped. She knew that sound. It was a jungle stalker, 4 legs, black scales, eyes that shone like green fire. It stepped forward slowly, tail swaying, teeth bare. The human stood between it and Raja, blade in hand. But she could see his hands shaking. That weapon was just scrap, barely sharp. The stalker crouched, ready to leap. Raja acted on instinct. She screamed, not in fear, but in challenge, a high-pitched, piercing call from deep in her chest. The stalker paused, confused. She screamed again, louder. This time, something in the trees answered another call. The creature turned its head, then slipped back into the jungle. Raja collapsed to her knees, her legs still weak. The human dropped beside her, checking her quickly. She was okay, just tired. She looked up and saw his eyes wide with shock and respect. "You saved me," he said softly. She gave him a tired smile. "Now we are even." Later that day, while resting near the shelter, they heard voices, not animals, not echoes, but words familiar and sharp. Raja's ears twitched. She stood up quickly, her balance shaky. Her tribe, they were coming. The human grabbed his blade and stood near her, ready to defend, but Raja shook her head. "No fight," she whispered. She stepped forward, her body shaking, but her face strong. The tribe appeared through the trees, warriors in dark paint and bone armor. At the front was her sister, face cold as stone. "You survived," her sister said, voice flat. "I did," Raja answered. "You let a human touch you. He saved me. That makes you unclean." Someone said from the group, "He risked his life." Raja snapped. Louder this time, "He sat by me when all of you turned away." The chief stepped forward now, an old male with long silver braids. His eyes were sharp, unforgiving. "You were meant to die," he said. "His help changed your fate, and that is forbidden." Raja looked at the faces she once trusted. Now they looked like strangers. "Then I don't need your rules," she said. "I won't be part of a people who watch their own die." Gasps filled the air. One warrior reached for his weapon, but the chief raised a hand. "You may go," he said. "But you are no longer of this blood." Her sister looked at her one last time. "I still love you," she whispered, "but I cannot follow you." Raja nodded once. "Then don't." She turned away, walked back to the human. He hadn't moved, still holding the blade, ready if needed. But Raja simply walked past him and sat by the fire. He followed slowly, not asking what happened. He just handed her a bowl of warm broth. She took it and sipped quietly. then looked at him and said, "Now, we make our own tribe." He nodded, not with words, but with understanding. And when night came, they sat side by side, two souls cast out, two lives saved by choices no one else dared to make. And the jungle, still wild and dangerous, now held something rare, a bond born not from blood, but from bravery. The forest felt different now. The leaves still whispered. The wind still danced. But something had changed. The shelter was no longer just a place to hide. It had become something else at home. Raja no longer woke in pain. Her leg still had scars, but she could walk without help now. Every morning, the human left early to gather food or scout nearby paths. And every evening, he returned with something: roots, berries, a dead bird, sometimes nothing. But each time he came back, he smiled when he saw Raja waiting, and each time she had the fire going, herbs drying and water boiling, without speaking much. They had fallen into a rhythm, a pattern stronger than words. One morning, Raja surprised him when he stepped out to start his usual search. She handed him a small spear she had made. It was carved from jungle wood, tipped with a sharp bone, tied tight with jungle thread. He stared at it, blinking, then smiled. He raised it high like a trophy and laughed softly. That same day, they went out together for the first time. He led through the thicker brush, watching for signs of danger. She followed, pointing out which plants healed and which ones burned skin. They moved like two sides of the same body, each noticing things the other missed. Near the stream, Raja found tracks big, wide, fresh. She crouched, her fingers brushing the marks. Something large had passed here recently, too close to their shelter. The human nodded, eyes narrowing. They both knew what it meant. Survival wasn't just about food anymore. They needed protection. That evening, they began building more walls from thick tree branches. Tied and layered with leaves, the shelter became stronger, taller, with a raised roof and space to store food. They added traps around the edge. Not to kill but to warn. As the days passed, Raja started laughing again. Small laughs at first, soft and unsure. But the more she laughed, the more the human did too. One night, as they sat near the fire, eating boiled roots, Raja asked him something simple. "Your name?" He looked surprised, then tapped his chest. "Ben," he said. "Ben is me." She repeated it slowly, like tasting a new fruit. "Ben." Then she pointed at herself. "Raja." He smiled, not just with his mouth, but with his eyes. It felt like something important had just happened. Not a ceremony, not a great event, just two people finally saying who they were. The next morning, Raja braided a piece of her hair and tied a small bone in it. A silent symbol from her people, marking a new path, a new choice. She didn't speak of the tribe again. And Ben didn't ask. One night, a storm rolled through the forest. Lightning cracked above the trees, thunder like war drums. The rain came hard and cold. But their shelter held strong. Inside, they sat close beside the fire, wrapped in furs and blankets. Raja watched the flames dance and whispered, "You never left me." Ben turned to her, confused. She placed her hand gently on his chest and said it again. "You never left." Ben didn't speak. He just reached out, took her hand, and held it. The fire between them flickered, but it didn't go out. Like them had survived the winds, the rain, and the cold. Later that night, Raja took a piece of charcoal and began drawing on the wall of their shelter. Simple marks at first, then shapes, trees, stars, and two figures standing side by side. Ben watched quietly, not interrupting. When she finished, she turned to him and said, "Our story." The rain slowed, the storm passed, and the night became quiet again. But something had grown in that silence. Not just trust, not just survival, something deeper, without knowing how or why. Raja and Ben had become more than just strangers surviving together. They were each other's reason to keep going. They didn't say it out loud, not yet, but it showed in every glance, every meal shared, every touch that lingered just a moment longer than before. The jungle was still dangerous, still wild, but now the two of them were ready for it. Together, the days had become calm. The air no longer felt like it was watching them. Even the birds sang more, and the trees seemed less threatening. But peace, Raja knew, never stayed long in the jungle. That morning she woke to silence. Not the quiet kind, but the heavy kind. The kind that made your skin feel cold. Ben was not inside the shelter. His tools were still there, his water container untouched. Raja stepped outside, eyes sharp. Her leg had healed, but a ghost of pain remained. She followed the path he always took toward the cliffs. He liked to watch the sun rise from there. Even on cloudy days, she found broken branches, signs of struggle. Footprints, deep and messy. Not his alone. She dropped to her knees and touched the earth. Something big had come through fast, wild. Then she saw it. Blood smeared on a rock. Not much, but fresh. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hand went to the bone-tipped spear by her side. She ran, faster than she should have, pain flaring in her leg. But she didn't care. Near the cliff edge, she heard a sound, not an animal, not the wind. It was a groan, low and weak. She pushed through thick leaves and saw him. Ben was lying on the ground, his side torn, shirt soaked red. Beside him was a beast she had only heard about in old stories. A stone beak huge, armored, with a face like cracked bone and claws like knives. Its body was still, its eyes glazed over. Ben had killed it, but not without cost. She dropped beside him, pressing cloth to his wound. "Stupid," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You're not allowed to die." He smiled faintly. "It's just a scratch," he lied, but she could see the pain. With all her strength, she helped him sit up. He couldn't walk alone. So she did something she hadn't done in seasons. She whistled, a high sound her tribe once used to call for help. But no one came. So Raja made a sled from branches and vines. She rolled him onto it, sweat pouring down her back. Then she dropped to all fours and pulled. The jungle was thick, the ground uneven, but she didn't stop. Not once. Her hands bled. Her knees scraped. Still, she kept moving. Every few steps, she checked his breath. Every few minutes. She whispered, "Stay with me." He tried to smile. Tried to speak, but mostly, he just watched her with tired eyes. Eyes that still believed in her. Even now, by the time they reached the shelter. The sun was high and hot. Raja nearly collapsed, but she kept going. She dragged him inside, tore open her bundle of herbs, mixed pastes, boiled water, wrapped his wounds, hands shaking, heart racing. Hours passed. She didn't sit, didn't eat. She only worked, fought, fought, not to the gods. Then to the stars above. "Please," she whispered over and over. "Just stay." Night fell. She curled up beside him, exhausted. Her fingers rested lightly on his chest, feeling every slow breath. He was alive when morning came. Ben opened his eyes. She was already awake. Staring at the wall, when she saw him move, she didn't cry. She only let out a long breath and whispered, "You're mine now." He smiled, barely. "I think I already was," he replied. They didn't say much after that, but something new had passed between them. Not just survival, not just kindness, a promise from that day on. Raja never let him walk into the jungle alone, and Ben never questioned her instincts again. Together, they grew stronger not just in body, but in spirit. Not just allies, but something more. And in the heart of a wild world, where everything wanted to kill them, they had become something rare, unbreakable. The jungle had changed, or maybe it was them. What once felt like a prison of trees and beasts had become a wide, breathing world, a home made by two unlikely souls. Ben's wounds healed slowly. He limped when he walked now, but he never complained. Raja stayed close. Always watching, always listening. They spoke more often now. A mix of words, signs, and glances. They didn't need much to understand each other anymore. One quiet afternoon, while Raja was drying herbs and Ben was fixing the trap line, a sound broke the peace. Drums, far away at first. Then louder, steady, heavy, familiar. Raja froze, her hands tightening around the vine bundle. She had heard that rhythm before when her tribe went to war. Ben stood up, holding his blade, eyes locked on hers. She nodded once. They're coming. Within minutes, the trees opened. A line of warriors appeared, painted in red and black, carrying spears and fire. At the front was the chief, her old tribe leader, and beside him her sister. But they weren't here to take her back. They were running, desperate, hungry, behind them. Smoke rose from deep within the jungle. Something had come, something even the hunters could not stop. A sickness, Raja guessed, maybe worse. The warriors looked thinner now. The strong looked tired. They had come not to fight, but to beg. The chief stepped forward, pride still in his voice. "We remember what you did, Raja. You walked away." She said nothing, her expression calm. "But now we need what you have," he said, eyes flicking toward the shelter. The herbs, the traps, the food, and the human. Ben stood behind her, silent but ready. The chief continued. "Help us or let us fall. And what happens after?" Raja asked, her voice cold. "Do I become unclean again when you no longer need me?" No one answered. Her sister stepped forward, placing her spear in the ground. "I was wrong," she said softly. "You lived. When we let you die, you built something better." Raja looked at Ben, who gave a small nod. She turned back to the tribe. "You can stay," she said, "but not as leaders. You learn what we know. You build with your hands. You hunt with your hearts. No ranks here." The chief hesitated, then slowly removed his headdress. He placed it at her feet. No more words were needed. Days passed, and the clearing grew crowded. Shelters rose beside theirs. Food was shared, traps extended. Raja and Ben became something they never asked to be, leaders. Not by name, not by force, but through respect. One evening, as the sky turned orange, Raja walked to the wall of her shelter, the place where she had drawn her story. She added two more figures, Maul. Standing between her and Ben, Ben stood beside her, holding two woven necklaces. "For them," he whispered. She looked up at him, surprised. "We're building more than walls." He said, "We're building a life." She took the necklace, tied it around her neck, then placed the other around his. She rested her head on his shoulder. The fire crackled behind them. The voices of her people mixed with the wind, but in that moment, it was just the two of them again. Alone, surviving, together, becoming something more. The jungle would always be wild. The world would never be safe. But now, they weren't just survivors of venom and fire. They were the beginning of a new kind of tribe. One made not from blood, but from choice, from kindness, courage, and something powerful enough to heal what was broken. Love. And it had all started with one bite. In the night,